You want to know the first thing they teach you about the Kessel Vantor Academy? Gravity lies. 1 deck, it's Orinth standard, easy on the knees. Take the lift up 2 levels and suddenly you weigh what a warhammer weighs, because half the species on this station need heavier plating just to feel at home. The architects built it that way on purpose, humility built into the floor plan. You never forget you're a guest here. I'm Corin Okonkwo Lindqvist. Everyone calls me Cor, because apparently my full name is a mouthful for a species with only one throat, according to my roommate. That roommate is Vessik Thane Orun, and he's the reason I'm telling you this story at all. Vessik is Ilthenari. If you've never seen one, imagine something like blown glass, given nerves pale, faintly luminous skin, joints that bend in ways that make human doctors wince, and a physiology so exquisitely adapted to vacuum and microgravity that a hard sneeze in full gravity can crack a rib. His people build starship nav cores that make our best human software look like an abacus. He can hold 17 orbital trajectories in his head at once and adjust for stellar drift without a calculator. He is, without exaggeration, the smartest person I have ever met. He is also, by the standards of most of this station, embarrassingly fragile. And here, fragile gets you noticed by exactly the wrong people. We met during the 3rd week of term, during a zero-gay astrocartography final that went sideways when a coolant valve failed and flooded our practice module with reaction gas. Half the class evacuated in the scramble. I didn't. Because Vessik's exobrace, the mechanical exoskeleton that lets his people function under gravity and stress, without their bones protesting, had locked up, frozen mid-cycle, and he was stuck floating in a slowly tumbling module filling with gas. Neither of us could breathe safely for long. I got him unhooked, hauled him to the emergency hatch by his collar like a sack of very expensive, very breakable groceries, and we got out 90 seconds before station safety sealed the module entirely. He said thank you approximately 400 times over the following month. I told him to stop. He didn't. That's just how Vessik is a species that remembers debts the way humans remember birthdays. We've been inseparable since. I help him navigate gravity wells and stairs he insists he doesn't need help with. He helps me not fail astrophysics. Fair trade. The problem is Kael Vrostimor Du. Kael is Bhorrun 4 arms, a carapace the color of wet slate, and a build like someone poured an industrial forklift into the shape of a person. The Bhorrun Combine sends cadets here under the Concord Treaty, same as everyone else, technically as equals, technically bound by the same rules of conduct. Technically. In practice, Kael runs the training decks like he owns them, because in every contest that matters to him, grip strength, sprint speed, raw explosive force, he wins, easily, against nearly everyone on this station. His people evolved on a heavy gravity world thick with easy calories, the kind of place where the biggest, fastest, hardest-hitting animal in any given 90 seconds simply wins and goes home to eat. Bhorrun culture is built entirely around that 90 seconds. First strike. Overwhelming force. Total dominance. Fast. And humans, in Kael's estimation, are a joke. Soft, slow, thin-skinned, embarrassingly average at everything physical, propped up in this academy by treaty law and not merit. He's said as much, loudly, more than once, usually while benching something that would flatten me instantly. He'd mostly left me alone. I wasn't worth the effort. Vessik was different. Vessik was an easy target, and Kael liked easy targets the way some men like mirrors. It started small, accidentally, bumping Vessik hard enough to nearly buckle his brace in a crowded corridor. Loud jokes in the mess hall about glass people who shatter if you look at them wrong. Once, I found Vessik's calibration tools scattered across the training deck floor, deliberately, the delicate ones bent just enough to be useless. I told him to report it. He wouldn't. It draws more attention, he said, in that careful, measured way he has, like every word costs him something. Attention is worse than the bruises. I let it go longer than I should have. That's on me. Then came the arena. The Academy's gravity variable training arena is used for combat theory practicals. You fight, spar, or run drills under shifting gravitational load, because Concord Doctrine says a soldier who can only function at 1 gravity is half a soldier. Kael's squad had booked a session. Vessik had booked the same deck 20 minutes later for a solo mobility drill. His physical therapist recommended. Easy stuff, low gravity, meant to strengthen the tissue around his joints without stressing his brace. Kael's squad didn't leave on time. I got there just as the argument started, Kael looming over Vessik, telling him solo cripples don't get priority scheduling, laughing with his squad while the arena's gravity, still locked at Kael's requested 1.8 standard, sat on Vessik's frame like a hand pressing down on glass. Then Kael shoved him. Not hard, by Bhorrun standards. Plenty hard for Vessik. I heard the brace crack before I heard Vessik cry out. A support strut along his spine, the primary load-bearing piece snapped clean, and he went down in the heavy gravity like something poorly hinged, gasping, unable to get his arms under himself fast enough, because gravity here was nearly twice what his body was built to fight. I don't remember crossing the deck. I remember Kael's laugh cutting off when I put myself between him and Vessik, and I remember the sound of my own voice, steadier than I felt, saying something I'd only ever read about in the Academy's founding charter, buried in a section nobody studies anymore because nobody's invoked it in 10 years. Champion's Remedy. I invoke Champion's Remedy, on behalf of Cadet Thane Orrin, against Cadet Du, for injury given in bad faith. Prefor 2 Zon, 2x2s Kent, might have agroded. The training deck went dead silent. Even Kael's squad stopped laughing. Champion's Remedy is older than the Academy's current charter. Folded in from the original Concord Accords, when half the founding species still settled disputes with ritual combat, and the treaty had to accommodate that without endorsing bloodshed. It lets any cadet challenge another, one-on-one, in a sanctioned ring, to settle a grievance of honor, when normal disciplinary channels are deemed insufficient. It's binding, public, and it has exactly one rule that matters. The match doesn't end on points, and it doesn't end on a clock. It ends when one combatant submits, is incapacitated, or collapses. No time limit, no stopping until somebody can't continue. Kael's shock lasted about 4 seconds before it curdled into something delighted. Of course it did. He looked at me 5'11", human, 170 pounds of a species his people consider a punchline, and I watched him do the math and come up with an easy afternoon. You're challenging me. He said it slowly, savoring it, already turning to his squad to make sure they'd all heard. The little exchange student is challenging me. They, recorder to thee and him stakling, workly recorder distorting, were cleaved at howling stake, and said, I am. You understand what happens to you. I understood, roughly. I understood that Bhorrun's strength ratings ran somewhere around 4 times human baseline. I understood that in the sparring logs, no non-Bhorrun cadet had lasted more than the first 90 seconds against one in a decade, and most of those ended in the infirmary. I understood Vessik, still on the deck behind me, one hand pressed against the fracture in his brace, saying my name in a voice that had gone very small and very afraid. I understood all of it, and some old, stubborn, mulish part of my brain, the part that had grown up hearing my grandmother tell stories about the Kalahari and about ancestors who didn't have claws or fangs or speed, who had exactly one advantage over everything that wanted to eat them, and used it for 2 million years until it built cities. That part of me looked at Kael Vrustamordu and thought, you have no idea what you just agreed to. I understand, I said. Station administration logged the challenge within the hour. Under Concord law, once invoked and accepted before witnesses, Champion's Remedy cannot be withdrawn without forfeit and formal censure. It also, under Academy tradition nobody had bothered updating in a decade, gets broadcast station-wide. Because ritual combat is supposed to be a lesson for everyone watching, not just the 2 people in the ring, which meant that by the time I got back to my quarters, the entire station, every dorm screen, every mess hall display, every species from a dozen homeworlds had a countdown ticking on their wall. 48 hours until the human and the Bhorrun stepped into the gravity ring, and everyone, had already decided how it would end. Vessik found me that night, his fractured brace held together with a temporary clamp, standing in our darkened quarters, staring at nothing. You should not have done this, he said quietly. I am not worth your body, Core. I didn't have a good answer for that. Not yet. So I told him the only true thing I had. Get some sleep. Tomorrow I need you to help me with something. I need everything you've got on Bhorrun thermoregulation and metabolic cycling. Every paper, every scan, everything. He blinked those pale, luminous eyes at me. Because, I said, I think everyone on this station is about to learn something about humans that they should have looked up a long time ago. The gravity ring is a 100-foot circle sunk into the training deck, walled in transparent alloy so a few thousand cadets and instructors can pack the observation tiers without risk. When I stepped through the access hatch, the noise hit me like a wall. Every species on the station has a different way of expressing anticipation, and together it sounded like a storm front. Kael was already inside, stripped to training gear, all 4 arms loose at his sides, carapace gleaming under the arena lights. He looked exactly like what he was. A predator built by a world that rewarded the first 90 seconds of any fight above everything else. Beside him, his squad wore expressions ranging from amused to bored, like they were waiting for a formality to conclude so they could go eat. On the observation tier, I found Vessik's face in the crowd. He wasn't cheering. He had both hands pressed flat against the transparent wall, and even from here I could see he was trembling. The arena's gravity display ticked over to match standard Bhorrun combat protocol, 1.8 standard, Kael's home field advantage, which he was fully entitled to request as the challenged party. That's fine, I told myself. That's fine. It changes my numbers, not my plan. The ref, a stone-faced Concord officer with no discernible allegiance to either of us, read the terms: submission, incapacitation, or collapse. No time limit. Both combatants nodded. The gate lights shifted to green. Kael came at me like a landslide. I want to be clear about what that means, because fast doesn't cover it. One moment there was 15 feet of ring between us, the next his fist, one of 4, and I only ever tracked one at a time, had clipped my shoulder hard enough to spin me half around before I even registered him moving. I hit the deck, rolled through it on instinct my body remembered from 100 wrestling drills back home, and came up already backing away, already breathing hard, already hurting. The crowd roared. Of course they did. This looked exactly like they'd expected. For the next 2 minutes, it kept looking that way. Kael was everywhere. 4 arms meant 4 angles of attack I had to account for simultaneously, and every connection he landed felt like getting hit by a vehicle. I didn't try to trade blows with him. I couldn't have, not for one exchange, let alone a fight. Instead, I moved, circled, angled my body to eat the glancing hits instead of the solid ones, gave ground when I had to, kept my hands up, kept my feet under me, kept breathing through my nose in long, controlled pulls the way I'd trained myself to since I was 9 years old, on cross-country teams that didn't care how fast you started, only whether you finished. By minute 3, I had a split lip, a shoulder that screamed every time I raised that arm, and bruising down one whole side of my ribs that I'd feel for weeks. Kael hadn't landed a single blow clean enough to end it, but he was landing plenty. And from the tier, I could hear Vessik saying my name over and over against the transparent wall like a chant, like a prayer. But I was watching something else. I was watching Kael's breathing. Here's what nobody on this station had bothered to research. Because why would they? The numbers all said Bhorrun win, so nobody studied the shape of how they win. Bhorrun physiology runs on massive, fast-twitch muscle fiber density fed by an incredibly rich homeworld diet, built for total dominance in the opening seconds of any confrontation. It is glorious. It is terrifying. It is also, biologically, a furnace with a very small fuel tank. Their bodies don't sustain that output, they spend it all at once, on the assumption the fight will already be over before the bill comes due. Their sweat glands are minimal because their homeworld's climate never demanded better. Their hearts are built for explosive output, not distance. In a fight lasting 90 seconds, that furnace is a weapon. In a fight lasting 5 minutes, it starts to become a liability. And nobody had ever made a Bhorrun fight past 5 minutes, because nobody had ever survived that long trying. I intended to survive that long. I intended to survive a great deal longer than that. My grandmother used to tell me, back on a porch in a part of the world so hot the air shimmered, that our ancestors never outran anything. Not one single animal on the plains where we came from, not the antelope, not the wildebeest, not anything with 4 legs and fur and claws. What they did instead, what nearly every human being alive today is descended from, whether they know it or not, was worse for the prey and better for us. They picked a target in the herd, and they followed. Not sprinting. Just moving. Steady. Relentless. Hour after hour. Through the hottest part of the day when every 4-legged thing on the savannah had to stop and pant in the shade because their bodies couldn't shed heat fast enough to keep running. And humans could. Humans are covered in more sweat glands than nearly any other mammal on Earth. stripped of the fur that traps heat, built with long legs and springy tendons, and a nervous system that could override the screaming urge to quit. So they followed. And followed. Through the heat, past the point where anything sane would have stopped, until eventually always the animal they were chasing collapsed from exhaustion and heatstroke, and they walked up to something 4 times their size, lying in the dust, beaten not by strength but by time. 2 million years of that built the animal standing in this ring. Kael's people never had to run anything down. They never needed to outlast. They needed to be the biggest thing in the first 90 seconds, and for 2 million years, that was always enough. It wasn't going to be enough today. By minute 6, Kael's punches were starting to arrive a fraction slower. Not much. Not enough for the crowd to notice. Still riding the momentum of a fight that looked, on the surface, exactly the way they'd expected it to look human, getting steadily worn down by superior alien strength. But I felt it, in the half-second longer it took him to recover his stance. In the way his breathing had shifted from controlled aggression to something with an edge of strain in it. By minute 9, sweat wasn't just on his brow, it was soaking through the fabric at his joints, visible even from a distance, his carapace darkening at every seam. Bhorrun, don't sweat well. What little moisture his body could produce wasn't coming close to shedding the heat his own muscles were generating. I kept circling, kept absorbing what I had to, kept giving ground, kept my breathing slow and even and metered like a metronome, kept drinking down oxygen in long controlled pulls even while my whole body screamed to gasp and pant the way every instinct told me to. Controlled breathing keeps your blood chemistry stable. Panic breathing burns you out twice as fast. I'd trained that instinct out of myself on 1,000 miles of trail runs long before I ever set foot on this station, and it was paying a debt now I hadn't known I was collecting. By minute 12, Kael missed a strike entirely. His whole body lurched with the wasted momentum, and for the first time, I saw something on his face that hadn't been there at the start. Not rage, confusion. By minute 15, the crowd noise had changed. I couldn't look up to see faces, but I could hear it, the roar thinning into murmurs, into a kind of stunned, uncertain quiet, because the fight in front of them no longer matched the fight they'd walked in expecting to see. The human wasn't winning. Not yet. Not by any measure that showed on a scoreboard. But he also, very clearly, was not losing anymore, and the alien throwing the punches was starting to look less like a landslide and more like a man running out of road. Kael knew it too. I watched him recognize it in real time, watched the fury replace the confusion, watched him try to end it one last, desperate, overwhelming charge, all 4 arms, everything his depleted body had left. A final 90-second gamble, because 90 seconds was the only unit of time his species had ever needed to plan around. I took the hit. I couldn't fully dodge it. He was still faster than me, still stronger than me, even exhausted, and it caught me across the jaw hard enough that the whole ring tilted sideways and the crowd noise turned into a dull ringing hum. I went down, actually down, this time, 1 knee and 1 palm on the deck, vision swimming, copper taste flooding my mouth. For 1 long, terrible second, I thought that was it. I thought I'd miscalculated, that his last reserve was still bigger than my endurance, that I was about to lose everything the fight, and worse, the argument I'd started this whole thing to make. Then I heard him. Behind me, above me, the sound of something enormous trying to draw breath through a body that had nothing left to give it. A wet, heaving, ragged sound, 4-limbed footsteps stumbling instead of striking. I got my other knee under me. Then my feet. My jaw was on fire. 1 eye swelling half shut. Ribs screaming with every breath. And I turned around anyway. Because that's the whole trick. That's the entire inheritance you get back up. Because the thing chasing you doesn't get to decide when you're done. Only you do. Kael was on 1 knee. His carapace had gone a dull, mottled gray at every joint, soaked through, his 4 arms hanging like they no longer answered him properly. He tried to stand and his legs simply didn't have it in them, and he went down hard onto the deck plating, chest heaving, eyes wide with something I recognized because I'd felt an edge of it myself in the worst mile of the worst race I'd ever run, not fear of an opponent. Fear of his own body failing him from the inside. The ref moved fast, scanning his vitals, calling it before anyone had to ask. Systemic exhaustion. Core temperature critical. Match ended not by knockout, not by submission spoken aloud, but by a body that had spent everything it had in the first 2 minutes and then discovered, for possibly the first time in his entire life, that the fight kept going anyway. I didn't feel triumphant standing over him. I felt like my whole body was one enormous bruise, and I felt, mostly, relief so total my knees nearly went out from under me a second time. The silence in the arena afterward was the loudest thing I heard all day. Medical teams got to Kael fast. Bhorrun heatstroke is serious, but survivable if caught early, and it was caught early. He'd be fine in a few days. Prouder for it or not, that wasn't up to me. I let the station's medics look me over too, mostly bruising, a hairline fracture in one rib, nothing that wouldn't heal. Vessik met me at the infirmary door before I'd even finished being scanned, moving faster than his brace should have comfortably allowed. And he didn't say anything at all for a long moment, just stood there, hand hovering like he wasn't sure it was allowed to land on my shoulder, eyes too bright. "You could have died," he finally said. I did the math first. I told him, which wasn't entirely true, but felt true enough in the moment. Your species runs on trajectories. Mine runs on distance. I know my own numbers pretty well. You are not built stronger than him. His voice cracked slightly on the word stronger, like it cost him to say. You are built to outlast him. That is not the same thing your people are usually given credit for. No, I agreed. It usually isn't. His brace had been fully repaired by the time I got out of medical academy. Engineering had rushed the replacement strut through the moment the challenge concluded, and I suspect a few instructors had gone out of their way to make sure of it. Given the sudden and highly public interest in whether the human exchange student's friend was being properly looked after, word travels fast on a station with no secrets and too many cameras. What I didn't expect was the shift in the corridors over the following days. Cadets from species I'd never spoken to stopped me to ask, with genuine, unguarded curiosity, how humans actually functioned. Not the polite diplomatic curiosity of the classroom, but the real kind. The kind that comes from watching an assumption break in real time and needing to understand why. Even a few of Kael's own squad approached, awkward and stiff, less to apologize. Bhorrun don't apologize easily. I've learned then to ask, almost reverently, how long I could have kept going if he hadn't collapsed when he did. The honest answer was, longer than either of us probably wanted to find out. Kael himself found me 3 days later, in the mess hall, moving stiffly, clearly still recovering. He didn't sit. He didn't smile. Bhorrun don't do either easily. He just stood across the table for a long moment, studying me the way you'd study a piece of equipment that had unexpectedly outperformed its listed specifications. You are the first thing that has ever outlasted me, he said finally. It wasn't quite gratitude. It wasn't quite respect. Either, not yet. But it was the beginning of something that had never existed between us before, the understanding that I was worth calculating for. Took me 2 million years of practice, I told him. He didn't understand the joke. That was fine. Vessik, sitting beside me, understood it perfectly. And the sound he made something between a laugh and a sob he'd clearly been holding on to since the moment the ref called the match was worth every bruise I was still carrying. Life on the station mostly went back to normal after that. Mostly. Vessik's schedule got a little more respect from the training deck bookings. Kael and I never became friends. Exactly. But the sneering stopped, replaced by something more careful, more measured, the kind of caution a species extends to something it's learned it doesn't fully understand yet. What I didn't expect came about 2 weeks later, when a message arrived in my academy account, with no student sender listed at all, just a Concord seal I didn't recognize, and 3 lines of text. Cadet Okonkwo Lindquist. Your engagement was observed with interest by Concord Defense Coordination. We would like to discuss an opportunity that does not appear on any standard curriculum. A representative will contact you within the week. I read it twice. Then I sat back in my chair, my ribs still aching faintly whenever I breathed too deep. And I thought about 90-second predators, and 2-million-year hunts, and the particular kind of trouble a person invites when they let the whole Concord watch them prove a point. Whatever was coming next, I had a feeling it wouldn't have a time limit either. The message sat there on my screen for a long time before I closed it. And I remember thinking with the particular clarity that only comes after you've already survived the worst thing you thought could happen to you that month, that this was probably not the kind of invitation you got to decline politely and forget about. I didn't answer it that night. I went and found Vessik instead, because whatever came next, I figured I'd earned one quiet evening first. He was in our quarters, running diagnostics on his newly repaired brace, humming something in that low, harmonic way Ilthenari do when they're content. He looked up when I came in, took one look at my face, and set his tools down. "Conquered defense coordination," I said, and told him everything. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, in that careful, measured way of his, "You realize what this means. They are not interested in a student who won a ring match. They are interested in a species whose fighters do not know when to stop existing. That's one way to put it. It is the only accurate way to put it." He looked at me steadily, luminous eyes catching the low light of our quarters. "I do not think you understand yet what you have started, Core, but I intend to be there when you find out. Someone needs to keep track of your trajectory." I didn't have an answer for that either. I just nodded, and let the silence sit between us comfortable, for once, instead of afraid. Whatever the Conquered wanted, whatever came through that door in a week's time, I had a feeling I wouldn't be facing it alone. And after the last 2 weeks, that was worth more to me than any of it.